Final Fantasy XIV is hurting its veteran players, and here is why.
Greetings, travelers. Time to make a boring and complicated video with less Joker, where I talk about a bunch of stuff, and somehow
Joker.
it all ties back into Final Fantasy XIV, just so that YouTube will recommend my content to people. I am but a mere slave to the algorithm. In today's class, we are going to start with the coldest take in all of human history. Designing games is very hard. All games, not just of the video variety. Not only is the medium hard to design for, there is such extreme variety within the space of games that there can be extreme gaps between what people enjoy or what people even want from the game itself. Not everyone likes.
And there are many niches. Like, there are sometimes people that love like so much strategy games, right? And as a gaming company, you could think about like some good idea for a new strategy game. How about Warcraft 4? Warcraft 4. Yeah, or like some people, they really love MMOs, but there are so many MMOs on the market, so you have to look at the MMOs that are out there. Is there any niche, like something that doesn't exist that people maybe gonna enjoy? How about an MMO with like a lot of crafting, sort of like Minecraft, but as an MMO or something like that? Because there are right now not any MMOs like that, right? Like, yeah, Valheim has multiplayer, but Valheim is not really an MMO. What if you have an MMO like Valheim, for example, where you can build stuff? It's maybe partially survival, right? But it's an MMO. Yo, that would be so lit, right? I think that's a good idea. So if any gaming company wants to make a new game and is watching this video right now, please consider making a crafting and survival MMO. That would be so lit. Yeah, if you guys are new to this channel, please don't forget hit that subscribe button for more content.
Solitaire, and not everyone likes Sekiro Shadows Die multiple times for very different reasons. Some games want to tell an interesting story, some are designed to help you relax, and others want to piss you off enough to keep playing them. Sometimes when playing a game that is fun and successful, it almost feels like a fluke that it was even created in the first place, because one of the most difficult things to do is to make a successful game and know the exact reason for its success.
Oh.
This is usually something that you will see if a team develops a sequel to a game where it still feels good to the majority of players, even with some slight gameplay tweaks, because they are able to keep what drew people into the game in the first place. Still, these sequels often won't appeal to every single original player of the original game. But I'm getting off track with what I want to focus on. Skill floors and skill ceilings. The floor being the bare minimum amount of work to understand the fundamentals of a game, and the ceiling being the amount of effort required to become the best at a particular game. Some games have low floors and high ceilings. Go and chess are easy examples. Some games have high floors and high ceilings, like my personal favorite board game of Food Chain Magnate. Bonus points if you know what that is.
I feel like WoW is one of those games that has like a very, very high ceiling, by the way. Like, if you look at like how many M plus keys there are, like some people they go for 20, some go for 25. There are a very small percentage of players that clear 27, 28. Like, I feel like the ceiling comes is really high when there are certain smaller gaps or scores, right? Like where you have like, for example, Mythic Plus key runs and stuff. You could say Final Fantasy XIV ceiling is a bit lower, but then again, the gaps are way, way bigger. Like, I give an example. If you clear a Savage, it's on a different kind of ceiling than if you clear an Ultimate in Final Fantasy XIV. However, there are fewer differences. In World of Warcraft, you have M plus keys, and they are going from 0 to even 28. And was there anyone that even cleared a 29 yet? If that's even possible, like, I don't know. But we have seen people go from 0 to 28. In Final Fantasy XIV, you go from normal to freaking Savage, then you go to Ultimate, right? So you have just like those kind of gaps, but yeah, and there are like some also jobs in Final Fantasy XIV that now have actually a really low ceiling. Like, some people say, for example, when it comes to like learning a class and performing well, that now Summoner is like super easy, and Samurai has also been made a bit easier and stuff. So yeah, I wonder if they are actually, like, Square Enix is bringing the ceiling more down in game. I feel like in WoW actually the ceiling gets higher, but in FF14 it's like going down a bit.
Skill floors and skill ceilings can often get conflated a lot when they involve playing against another player, because while chess might not be hard to learn, if you are playing against someone who knows what they are doing, you are going to get obliterated.
Yeah.
This is also
It's
true
always like
for
that
fighting
any game.
games and true for all competitive games. It is why it can be super hard to get into competitive games, when you will usually have to get to a similar skill level of your opponents to start feeling like you have any chance at success. Not many people can let themselves get steamrolled for several hundred matches before getting frustrated. So this introduces a problem. You are a developer, and you want to sell copies of your game. You don't want people to get scared away by an initial skill curve, so in order to get more people to play your game, you lower the skill floor. And you do it again. And you do it again. Over and over again.
That's just what I mentioned, right? How they made like certain classes more simple, right? I'm not sure if they nerfed mechanics within dungeons and stuff, but they made certain jobs way easier, like Summoner, for example. And I think Samurai is now quite easy, right?
People to play your game, you lower the skill floor. And you do it again. And you do it again. Over and over again. Does this have any consequences?
Yes.
It is almost impossible to change the skill floor of a game without affecting the skill ceiling as well. Although it doesn't directly correlate that lowering the floor also lowers the ceiling, it will most of the time. But the skill floor exists to get people into the game. What is the skill ceiling here for?
For veterans.
To keep people playing the game.
Exactly.
Games with really high ceilings will have people playing them for seemingly forever, as the game will never truly be solved for all of human history. Shit like chess, StarCraft, League of Legends, Super Smash Bros. Melee, and your choice of Tekken, Marvel vs. Capcom, Old Melty Blood, or even Skullgirls. You get the idea. I could jerk off the FGC some more, but that would leave me feeling disgusted at myself.
Oh, wow.
Besides, I threw Melee in there as well, which... Of course, I only listed competitive games so far. Are there single-player games with extremely high skill ceilings? Hell yeah, Celeste, Mushihime-sama, Hades, and Hand It Over, that thing. Every popular from soft...
Elden Ring. Yeah, Elden Ring has a ridiculous skill ceiling. Like, holy shit. Like, there are some fights in Elden Ring where people like try it over and over again until like maybe 100 times they finally beat the boss. Like, Elden Ring is one of the hardest and most difficult single player games I have ever seen before. It is insane. Like, some of those fights and mechanics, like, you need to have reflexes as fast as freaking Spider-Man or something. Like seriously, you need to be like a superhuman being to react to that almost. Like, Elden Ring, yeah, a lot of people that tried Elden Ring, they at some point like raged and they rage quit. They still came back though, but they rage quit for a short period.
For a title.
Holy shit.
And literally anything that is actively speedrunned.
Could you say Minecraft is with a high skill ceiling?
What is the proper past tense of speedrun? Who cares? An ideal game is one that is easy to get into, but gives you the opportunity to waste tons of additional hours going way beyond what is expected for the average player. I will emphasize that this is an ideal and not often a reality. For games that you only want to sell one time and people sinking many hours into it doesn't automatically make the company more money, you might think that having a high skill ceiling wouldn't matter for sales. But it does help build brand loyalty so that people keep coming back for your next title and don't feel ripped off. I am not going to go into an entirely business-focused discussion here, but much like how there is a balance in game design with the actual art of making a game and the balance of making money, there is also a balance in where you place your skill floor and the skill ceiling. You don't want your game to be too alienating that nobody can get into it, but you also want to give a reason for people to stick around so they don't immediately get bored and feel like they wasted their time.
Don't they usually do this in games where they make like the story super easy, especially like in MMOs, like the main story? But if you do like certain side missions, challenges, or in MMOs like dungeons and raids, they're like super difficult sometimes. Like I've seen some gaming companies do that, where like the main story of a game is super simple, so people can get into it, and like casual players have a place, right? And then there are like those certain achievements or challenges you can do, or in MMOs like dungeons, raids, and they are super hard to do. Like I've seen this. A good example is, for example, like it's an MMO example, is Elder Scrolls Online. I feel like the main story, like if you go through the campaign, everything, like the story, it's very easy. You don't need special sets or gear or anything. You can just have some random gear and finish it, right? But when it comes then to some dungeons, or you want to get into, let's say, PvP or something else, it's getting really tough and difficult. Yeah, it's the same also in World of Warcraft, actually. I feel like questing around in zones, you don't need the best in slot gear. And everything is so simple. But when you get to like some keys and you want to do higher keys, that's where like the skill ceiling gets higher, and you see who spends most of their time into the game and who doesn't, because you do need to spend a lot of time to actually not only gear out but also get used to all the mechanics and stuff. And I guess that's what's keeping players engaged with the game, because they have some goal that they are striving towards. In WoW, for example, a person that cleared a plus 12 key, they have the goal they want to clear at least a plus 20. So you have goals, right? Or mythic raids, like maybe someone really wants to finish a mythic raid, they're not happy with just heroic. Or in Final Fantasy XIV, you want to one time in your life finish an ultimate. The only thing you have done so far are savage runs and stuff. So hey, time for an ultimate. Let's practice a couple of months and then get into it. Yeah, that's what's keeping players engaged with the game, and them not quitting.
So how does this all tie back into Final Fantasy XIV? Well, I'm glad you asked. Allow me to elaborate on some of my recent comments on the direction that has been stated for the game. Job design and fight design, baby. Something that can be really hard to understand. Jobs in Final Fantasy XIV used to be so much more complicated than what you see today. I'm not talking about Shadowbringers or Stormblood.
I wish it was more
I'm
complex.
talking mostly about Heavensward. This was the peak of complexity for job design in Final Fantasy XIV in many ways. An era that is either gilded or stained in people's minds based on whether you could get past the initial skill curve. With DPS checks so notorious that whispering Faust in the direction of a veteran from this time causes them to pee themselves just a bit, either with excitement or fear or a mix of both. This era is usually met with some mixed responses, because while jobs had some of the highest ceilings, it was also met with some of the most difficult skill floors, and other associated gameplay jank. This is from a time when people didn't get their cooldowns reset after a wipe, also a time in which Paladin was unviable, physical ranged had a casting stance, cleric stance existed.
Okay, that was annoying.
Monk, and accuracy was an actual stat.
Okay, if those things are in the game, I think it's better they change them, even if it gets more simple, because that's annoying. I don't like in games where I have like a long cast time, or if I want to use an attack and I have to wait for eternity. That's why I love like fast-paced combat more. Like I have skills that I can just spam and stuff and not cast for eternity, or I have to prepare something for such a long time with a long cooldown. I think that's annoying.
This expansion is hard to talk about because people need to be very specific about the stuff that they liked in particular, and also have to acknowledge all of the additional jank that probably wasn't that good. Savage raiding was also way harder than today in literally every aspect. Stormblood saw the reduction of a lot of the jank that was associated with Heavensward, and it's also where Savage was made easier, and Ultimate was introduced to appeal to people who like the difficulty of older Savage. Shadowbringers removed even more complexity, usually in the form of things like aggro management, heal mechanics, and different damage types, with no changes to the actual difficulty of fight design. Except that the Epic of Alexander Ultimate was largely considered to be the hardest Ultimate by many, and I don't really want to elaborate on it
I love
too
the
much.
Alexander.
You kind of get the idea.
One.
A big part of why tanks and healers don't like Shadowbringers is that they had complexity removed in the form of aggro management no longer existing and healers having less damage buttons. In its place, they got absolutely nothing else. Great. This made it easier to get into the support role types that would originally alienate new players and clog up the queue times for everybody. However, as most people who play those jobs after the change, it feels like there is a massive hole for what they had to manage before, a missing puzzle piece that hasn't been filled since then. This is where I want to get into the difference between easy content and hard content in Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah, I think the issue for like veteran players was when this was like all simplified is that they are used to a very complex rotation. So within 5 minutes, there are so many actions they take. They do this and this and this. Let's say, okay, now there's like a certain cooldown you need to manage. There are like dots to maintain. Like for example, on Summoner, you had to like maintain certain dots and stuff, right? What is no longer the case. And you had like so much stuff to do. And now that it's like more simple, you get into the same dungeons and there are not like so many new mechanics that were added. Because if you, for example, would make, let's say, a class, a job perform more easy, like you have less complex rotation, then what you could do as a gaming company is make the mechanics within a dungeon a bit more harder, right? Like let's say there's a phase where like a boss swings the sword and is like charging it. You have to get behind a pillar. Then after that there's like a break of just a couple of seconds. And then let's say the boss will jump up or something, and then you have to go behind, let's say, a pillar again, or you have to maybe get on top of that pillar or something, and maybe there's like some sort of ladder or something. Like there's some cool mechanics you can actually introduce when you make also classes more simple, right? So yeah, I think they could have like added to old content if they make everything more simple, some new mechanics that are a bit challenging, especially for like Savage and Ultimate and stuff, right?
Things like old aggro management do affect casual players with how they will meet the initial skill curves in this game. Because yes, you need to be able to hold aggro in even the most comatose-inducing of content. DPS buttons don't really affect healers, but having to press cleric stance and manage cleric stance certainly does. Healers having something like 2 more DPS buttons and DPS buttons in general is where I want to focus the most, because DPS buttons in easy content in Final Fantasy XIV do not matter at all. You cannot call any of it difficult. You want to know why? Because you don't need to do anything with it to complete the instance. I don't give a flying fuck how overly complicated you make some DPS rotations in this game. It can require 500 APM and 8 hotbars to maximize. If you don't need to do that amount of damage to clear the encounter, you can't call the job hard. This is why DPS is so incredibly brain-dead easy in anything that is considered normal content.
That's why I like
healers. Because the game doesn't require you to press anything, you just exist. This is why talking about job design in Final Fantasy XIV is so immensely frustrating, because how hard and how easy a job is considered by you is going to entirely be based on what type of content you are running. Black Mage rotation is easy and straightforward. It's basically free in anything that is easy, since it's not going to make you run around a bunch, and even if you manage to drop your entire rotation, you are still going to complete the fight. On the flip side, if you are playing Black Mage in Ultimate content, you will have to be pretty calculated and probably work harder than someone playing a physical range job. This is why I still call Black Mage hard, because even I'm not enough of a fucking masochist to even consider playing it in Ultimate. There are people who consistently do play the job, though, even in Ultimate, even during progression, and that's great. They like it. They also probably...
Maybe we should level up Black Mage, since it's more challenging. No, but seriously, I've heard this from talking to some Black Mages, that they have to sometimes even know a fight already before they enter it, right? Like a certain dungeon, because there are certain phases where they're actually having a huge DPS loss because they're no longer in the position they should be in, or certain skills that they cast take a bit, right? So if they don't time their cast and where they are standing, they're gonna miss out on a lot of DPS, and the whole group is going to suffer from that because you don't contribute as much DPS as the others. So yeah, I think that's that's like one of those jobs that like is really appealing to veteran players also because of that, right? I wonder if that's why Yoshi P mains it.
Play the job a lot and know how to manage it well. Kind of like how I still play Samurai because I'm comfortable on the job.
Yeah.
This all kind of wraps back to the
Same
idea
like Beast
of
Mastery
jobs being
Hunter in
easy,
WoW.
but the gameplay content is hard. This just isn't possible with how Final Fantasy XIV is designed, but also I simultaneously think it's its greatest strength. Final Fantasy XIV is awesome because hardcore and casual players can effectively separate themselves so that we never have to step on each other's toes. This distinction is made based on what type of gameplay content you want to participate in. When the jobs have some challenging parts and interesting optimizations, it means that players can make easier content more fun for themselves by trying to deal maximum damage. Parsing? It's not just for annoying parsers, though. Even players who never want to step foot into something like Ultimate are more than willing to try to play the game better.
Yeah.
I know plenty of people personally who never attempted Savage for a very long time, but absolutely knew their rotations for jobs because it made the game more satisfying for them. The game offers you a skill ceiling, a way to get some more hours out of it.
That's also one of the goals I have. I want to clear one time an ultimate. I've never cleared an ultimate before, but I really want to be able to at least one time do this. That's a goal I have in my FF14 career, you could say.
The typical complete idiot, they can see the Samurai AoE changes and proceed to use their single target rotation for an entire trash pull anyways, because these changes aren't going to make them play the game in a logical manner. Which brings me to the real question. Who are these changes intended for? Super casuals who don't want to play the game correctly anyways? It can't be, because they're just going to mash whatever button their little heart desires.
Yeah.
Is it for hardcore players who are going to maximize their job no matter how stupid it is? That doesn't seem right either, because usually those are the players that are most in love with the small amounts of complexity that the game offers them. What these changes seem to be is a way to lower the tier of entry to get into something like Savage or Ultimate, because when you are completely new at this game and nothing is required of you as you play all the easy content for thousands of hours, you might start to get a little bored and want to try something a little bit more challenging, only to finally be hit with some of the first real skill curves this game will throw at you.
And then you
learning
get
how to
frustrated.
maximize raid buffs at the start of a fight and maintaining a DPS rotation.
So they are doing it basically. That's what Misshapen Chair thinks, that people that do want to clear like really difficult content, that they don't get frustrated because the difficult content is too hard for them or what. But that's also weird then, because if they clear it one time, then what comes after? Like, I don't know. Like there needs to be then after Ultimate, like what could be another name? Like maybe Super Extreme or something, or Super Ultimate. Yeah, maybe Super Ultimate. Like maybe if they keep nerfing stuff or making stuff more simple, they need to add after Ultimate a new stage called Super Ultimate or something. So the skill ceiling gets higher again and there's like new stuff to like grind for. Like, hey, I've cleared now all Ultimates. Now my next goal is to clear all Super Ultimates.
Of some
Holy
kind.
shit.
For tanks and healers, it's also when you really have to start planning out your cooldowns. This is when the game goes from absolutely nothing mattering to everything mattering all at once. Players who hit this first wall will usually experience some frustration at how they feel like they have to completely change their approach to the game. You do. It is not the same game that you've been playing this entire time. Because there is this distinction, though, between easy and hard, people who don't want to learn how to play their job correctly can just be filtered out. So instead, these changes of making the job easier to play seem to be directed at players who want to get into Ultimate, but also simultaneously don't want to learn how to play their job. Usually at the cost of pissing off people who like the job for whatever difficulty or gameplay that it provides, ultimately making it easier to get through something that is supposed to take up the time of the people who put the most hours into the game in the first place. Is it hard to do stuff in Ultimate? Yes, that is the point. That content is here to fuck us up. Not everyone is suited to slam their head into something over and over again until they get it
Only
right.
for true pros,
That's
right?
why it is so weird that it appears that they want to lower the bar of entry when it helps let players gauge if that type of content is something that they would even enjoy in the first place. Like many things in Final Fantasy XIV, it is not for everybody. Once again reminding us that we...
I remember doing this kind of thingy, and it was horrible. I was for days trying to jump on top of this tower just to get this one sighting point there. But there's like a lantern that you need to jump on, and you need to freaking... What's this place called? Kugane, right? And you have to like get on top of that and then jump down. Like, this is the hardest parkour I've ever done in FF14. It took me days to actually get that point there.
We get to decide how serious we want to take the game depending on what we sign up for. The only time casuals and hardcores have to deal with each other is when the jobs themselves change. This also gets into the very hard territory of what is considered gameplay nuance and gameplay hindrances. What is considered a unique hurdle to play a job correctly, and what is considered unintended difficulty? A question that you can only really answer if you play a job a lot and have an exact understanding of what it is that you like about it. You will commonly see people throw around the claim that the developers do not play the jobs in this game. That's not true. They play 3 jobs: Black Mage, Dragoon, and Paladin.
Wait.
These jobs have varied in their viability.
Wait a second. Okay, I know Yoshi P plays a Black Mage, right? But who plays the Paladin, for example? And who plays Dragoon? I don't know, maybe the others.
Dragoon and Paladin. These jobs have varied in their viability, but from the raw gameplay standpoint, they have been consistent since the dawn of A Realm Reborn. Black Mage is not having its cast times reduced to make it a generally mobile caster. Dragoon still has to use its gap closers for DPS, and Paladin still has the most interesting core GCD rotation for a tank. Even though people find these aspects of the jobs challenging or frustrating when learning how to play these jobs, they have never fully compromised them. Black Mage has more mobility options now, and Dragoon doesn't get locked down for as long anymore, but they would never outright remove these aspects of the job because they can easily identify that it is core to the gameplay loop and core to the identity of the job.
Because they're playing it.
When a change is made to a job that causes a massive...
Of course, because the devs are actually playing it. Like, if you are a game developer and you have, like, let's say a certain class that you are testing longer than another class, then you're more familiar with it and you see what's lacking and what's not lacking. And you could have the impression about another class that it's too simple or too difficult because you haven't played it as much, right? So this may be unrealistic because I can imagine that the devs are pretty busy. They have other things to do. Some have a family at home with like kids and stuff. So I'm sure their time is limited. But what they could do, but this also takes time, is find one developer within the studio that plays one job specifically. Like, let's say this one gets assigned to Dragoon, this one gets Samurai, this one gets Ninja, and they have to play it for several months, and then after several months they meet on the table and they say, hey, what did you learn about your job? What do you think it's lacking? What do you think needs to be nerfed, buffed? How do you feel like in doing more difficult content and stuff? Like, they could do that, right? Like, they could assign one job per employee and they have to test it for several months. I think that would be nice because then you have the same situation that you have right now with those 3 mentioned ones, right? Like Dragoon, Paladin, and Black Mage. So yeah, like, that's the thing. That's the same with like World of Warcraft. Like, I'm pretty sure that there are some class specs that not a single dev plays or not much. Like, we have seen sometimes certain specs get nerfed so much or become so irrelevant in higher keys that it's like crazy. Like, who plays actually at freaking Blizzard, for example, Retribution Paladin? How comes it's always so low on the ranking in M+ keys? Is there another dev that like can point this out, like, hey, there needs to be maybe some more utility or something cool for them, maybe something that makes them faster or so. Like, yeah, if the devs, they don't play a certain class, it's more likely they're gonna mess it up. with a future expansion or patch.
Of uproar from the community that mostly plays said job, things like the chitin removal and trick attack changes, it is usually because it seems like such a drastic change in what people think is core to that job. Even something like removing dots on Summoner has been met with some very solid pushback.
Yeah,
I don't
I
really
miss the
care for
dots
the
somehow.
argument that the dots make the job harder. It really doesn't. But the idea that dots are core to the identity of Summoner
Yeah,
is
I
a
liked
much
the
more
dots.
solid and reasonable argument.
It's like Warlock in
Especially
WoW,
since
if
dot
dots do.
gameplay isn't really expressed anywhere else in this game. At least not with the way of
Sadly.
how old Dreadworm Trance and Tri Disaster functioned. Sorry, Bard. Given how Summoner currently plays, it's honestly not that hard to see how these two buttons could have still easily fit into the rotation
Yeah.
with little to no consequence to the gameplay and still preserving this aspect of
At
the
least
job's
get
identity.
us one
I
dot
don't hate
back.
the new Summoner, by the way, and my biggest problem with old Summoner was trying to get the pets to cooperate, which even
Yeah,
then,
they were buggy.
hey devs, you want to know why people wanted instant cast during Bahamut? It was so that you wouldn't lose a worm wave while Bahamut was out, since that was tied to you finishing your cast. But now that Bahamut is entirely independent, I would have expected it to be a low mobility phase and for Phoenix to be your high mobility phase, at least based on how it played in previous expansion. Also, why doesn't Summoner get to alternate two buttons during Phoenix anymore? That was something that a lot of people liked, and I didn't think it needed to go away. All this comes around to asking the same question again. Who are these changes intended for? I don't
think new
know the
players.
answer, because every time I try to come up with a solution, it doesn't seem like it makes sense. Is it the people who play the job, or
No, I don't think it's the people that play the job. I think it's the new players. And do you guys know why I think that also? Like, not only does it make sense, because it's like easier to learn this, but if we look at the history and the growth of Final Fantasy XIV, and like Square Enix is aware of this, like during the phase where Mr. Asmongold started like freaking streaming Final Fantasy XIV, and when like WoW players started like quitting WoW, like during this phase, a lot of new players came to Final Fantasy XIV, and they noticed that, oh, our game is now growing with a new player base. We have so many new players incoming, and people are also doing like more advertisement for the game, because they will tell their friends and relatives about the game, how fun it is. So now we have so many new players. What do we do with them? Like, stuff is too complex. You know what? Let's make everything more simple. So I'm pretty sure it's because of the new players that are coming in, because there are many new players coming to FF14. Like, this whole past 10 months were crazy for the game.
up with a solution, it doesn't seem like it makes sense. Is it the people who play the job, or is it the people who don't like the job and apparently can't find anything else in the game for them to play? A lot of these changes do not seem directed towards preserving aspects of the job that people enjoy. Some jobs are not going to be popular with every single player, but I think that's okay. You have 18 jobs in this game. It's fine if some of them are not as popular, especially if the people who
can
play
always
it
switch.
like it.
You're not
You
locked
want me to
behind a
give
job.
2 more examples? How about Gunbreaker? People will complain about how much weaving that you need to do on that job. And you know what I say? Why the fuck are you playing Gunbreaker? It is literally the busiest tank. That is the identity. That is
that's
what
fun.
makes Gunbreaker Gunbreaker. You have Paladin and Warrior if you want to play a less busy tank that is also viable, because everything is viable. So why change a job that is designed to have tight weaving and burst windows? It's a bit mind-numbing because they did make the job busier this expansion, and that kinda seems like the next logical step to expand upon the job from Shadowbringers. They also gave it another cartridge and added another cartridge spender, which seems about right. While I
Yeah.
don't think this is a perfect upgrade, I can see the direction that they want to take the job, and I think it still preserves the identity of what it was about. You wouldn't want to remove an aspect from a job's resource management. You would expect them to add to it. I personally like the busyness of Gunbreaker. That's why I like playing it over the other tanks. Don't take that away from me. Yeah, it might make it harder to move bosses during burst windows, but it's not impossible, and it's a gameplay nuance to playing the job. Another tank that got a change is the cone attack on Warrior. Why? Is the cone optimal? No. Is it viable? Yes. You have 3 other tanks in this game that do not function that way. 3 other choices of jobs that don't have to deal with this nuance. The same people who will scream about how
It's the same with like some healers. Like, why did they remove certain skills? For example, on the astrologian. Why did they want to make the astrologian not have kind of shields and this and that? Like, there are some changes. Like, sure, they want to separate and give like more identity to certain jobs, right? But I don't think some of those changes were necessary. That's just my opinion.
homogenization of jobs in this game are more than willing to indulge the practice. What about samurai AoE? I liked having to weave my character in and out of a trash pull so that I could cleave everything. Fuck, being able to walk out of the middle of a trash when all of their AoEs get baited was a nice thing. You
Yeah.
could say that a cone is better than a circle in very specific circumstances. But no, Samurai couldn't possibly have this uniqueness. People couldn't possibly like it. They want to make
So
it
they
like
have to
other
change
melees
it
who
again.
don't have to move. Is moving our character and targeting an enemy considered to be too much to ask? Seriously? You know why I'm
didn't
really
find it
irritated
difficult.
at that change in particular, though? The playstyle of having circle AoEs and building up your big hits that are cones. You want to know what job does this right now? Yeah, that's right. It's Reaper. Reaper gets to have the unique AoE shapes and have this fun
Holy
little
shit!
movement.
So did they? So they intend like by that's why they changed stuff about samurai. So it was for Reaper. Oh, a new job is coming, Reaper. Shit. It has a lot of similarities with samurai. Yeah, we need to change something. That's also why I think they did this to astrologian when Sage came, right? Like, hey, we need to change something about astrologian. We can't have Sage be too similar to astrologian or something. Maybe, I don't know. Like, I'm assuming it's because like samurai because of Reaper and astrologian because of Sage.
Pattern of weaving their character in and out. But not Samurai anymore. Reaper's allowed to have that fun, and it's considered gameplay nuance for them. But not for Nippon Steel. Learning how to angle your AoE was something that you just picked up over time and got better at. That's it. It was viable. So why did it need to change? Who are these changes intended for? I guess Reaper's going to get this taken away next expansion after they decided that people enjoyed it too much. I'll say the last quiet part out loud here. Why did anyone put the work in to play the job correctly if it is just going to be taken away? Why did I waste my time learning it? Because it seems like the correct answer to these skill curves in this game is to just complain enough until they take it away. That is how I feel. That is how it seems to me and to many players. It doesn't have to be the intention of the developers, but it definitely comes across that way. And for all the people who keep complaining about these micro difficulties, having uniqueness to jobs will make some slightly harder to play than others. It
Yeah.
is fine as long as nothing is unviable, because if you are going to complain that an aspect of one job is harder than another, the only answer is going to be to make them all exactly the same.
No, you don't
Anyways,
want
I could
that.
go on for hours and fixate on tiny changes that I don't like and go back to being the Joker. Here is what I want to be clear about. Final Fantasy XIV gets its complexity from the job design. It gets its skill ceiling from the job design. This is because you don't have to play the jobs correctly unless you're attempting to play something hardcore. You can still challenge yourself to maximize a
Yeah, but that's also good if you have this. Let's say you have a certain job that you're playing on, and you can perform mediocre very easily, right? But to have like maximum performance, there are like a few steps you need to add into your rotation, like some extra skills you have to maintain, and then you are like super good. I think they should make it where not you have a good performance easily, but where you can be on the mediocre level very fast, right? And from anything beyond that, like you have to like really practice hard. I think that's a nice way to balance things out, to make it attractive to like new players, because they can get on a mediocre level very fast, but also offer veteran players the chance to get to the maximum of the potential and performance of your of your job. So I don't know, maybe we really need just more skills or something. But then again, I feel like one issue they have with Final Fantasy XIV when it comes to like adding of skills is there's also console, and a controller has fewer buttons than a keyboard. So I think the issue is like how to balance stuff between console and computer, because you have like more keys on your keyboard than you have buttons on your controller. So yeah, I think that's also an issue.
Job though, and content that you find boring to make it interesting for yourself. Making players only able to satisfy themselves by going into only the hardest content that they like is going to make them hate the rest of the game by proxy. This is something that hardcore players already experience, but this will absolutely exacerbate the problem even further. Final Fantasy XIV is a good MMO because it gives you the tools to min-max if you want to, but it doesn't require you to.
Yeah.
That is why I hate lowering the skill ceiling, because it hurts some of the most dedicated players who sank the most amount of time into this game. Min-maxers already coexist with mediocre players like me. That is why this game works. That is why this game is successful. The last thing I want to mention that I didn't have a good place.
I can give you guys one example of a game that actually failed because stuff was simplified. And this is ESO. Like, sure, ESO still has a lot of players, but they did something horrible to ESO. They removed stuff like animation cancelling. You can no longer skill cancel some skills because now they must be cast completely. And the cool thing about ESO was also from PvE, and I'm now just talking about PvE perspective, not PvP, because in PvP animation cancellings, they were even heavier because they were like literally saying who was good and not at the game, because if you animation cancel, you can hit someone with 3 or 4 skills in a time window where the other player will hit you with just 2 skills. So you do like 1/3 more DPS at least, right? So this was like really OP in PvP. But in PvE, it's the same. Like you have certain phases in ESO. You go into a dungeon, there's like this boss, and now you have to like nuke the boss or do this and that. And you could like animation cancel every single skill. All you need to do is you cast your skill, and then you press block, because you can block in ESO, and then the skill still goes off, but the cast time is not completed, or like the animation, let's just say animation. So the animation of your skill is interrupted, but your skill goes through. And the cool thing was in ESO was, for example, you could swing a sword on a melee class, and when the sword was like near to the target, if you press block, then the slice is sort of interrupted. It looks like a smaller slice of your weapon, but the damage is actually done already. So what you could do is you could like use 4 or 5 skills in a time window of like 2-3 skills. That means your DPS went really, really high if you had fast reflexes and you knew at which point of the animation you can press block to cancel it. Because if you cancel stuff too early, you mess up. Like you have to time everything, otherwise you literally block and no skill comes out or something. And I loved that because it gave you a very high skill ceiling, and people that have been playing the game for a while, they could get to a level that no one else could get unless they played for 1+ year or so.
To slide in, I don't like this quote of Yoshi P that gets thrown around a lot when discussing the game because I think it gets misinterpreted, at least in my opinion. Yoshi P said that people shouldn't feel bad about unsubbing and that they should resubscribe when the game gives them something that they want to do. This does not mean that he wants people to actively unsub.
It's just out of politeness.
Want people to feel like they are forced to stay subbed. Unless you own a house. He wants players to play the game when they feel like it has earned their time. I think it's still an admirable way to make an MMORPG centered around not forcing people to waste time on it. But by continuously lowering the skill ceiling that exists, it will slowly push people away over time and give them less reason to stick around and less reason to stay subscribed. That is the reason why I am so passionate about this, because I like this game. Heck, I'd even say that I love Final Fantasy XIV. I do not want to see it fail, because by the time these issues really start to catch up with the game, it will already be too late. I don't think the state of the game right now is bad, but I don't like the direction that it is going in. This is something that everyone should at least keep in the back of their mind. These flaws and these negative feelings that people have towards certain aspects of the game are very real, whether or not I am the one voicing these opinions. It is also why criticizing games isn't always about trying to ruin them. At least not all the time. It's
constructive feedback.
Now let's get out
Nothing
there
wrong with
and turn all jobs into just one singular button that plays on autopilot.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I feel also a bit strange about some of the changes. Like, sure, some changes are nice. And like the way now summoner pets work. It's nice, but why did we have the dots removed, for example? Like, I missed the dots already on the summoner, sort of. I actually loved keeping dots up. It reminded me of a Warlock in World of Warcraft, and I used to main Warlock for a long time actually in WoW. It was one of my most favorite, classes. In old school at least, WoW. And yeah, like, I don't know, it's good, but at the same time it's really hurting like the players that have been invested into the game for years, like those true veterans. Because now, yeah, new players and casual players, they have an easier time. They can now clear Savage if they couldn't before. Some maybe even have an easier time doing ultimates. But what about those people that clear everything? Then they have nothing that they can grind for anymore, right? And then they have like literally beaten every single content, and it's no more as difficult as it used to be. And also, what about PvP? Like, if you make a class too easy, then how is the skill ceiling in PvP? This is what I mentioned earlier about ESO, when they removed animation cancelling and they said, hey, certain skills can no longer be block cancelled, or you can no longer skill cancel certain skills. Like, everything was like more slow paced and stuff, and the combos you had were suddenly no more combos. You had to lose every single skill individually. You couldn't line up certain bursts and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. And then there's also the fact that, like he pointed out, like Misshapen Chair, he pointed out that certain changes happened when new jobs came. Like Reaper made maybe like changes to Samurai, like the Reaper is the reason why. And I also mentioned that I believe that Astrologian was probably changed because of Sage. Like, it's really looking like that, because why would you remove certain skills that a new job that's coming has? You're trying to like make everything more unique, but you're also removing something that players perhaps really liked about it. Like he just said, like he actually liked the way AoE worked on a Samurai. And I also think it was actually cool to have some sort of shielding also on Astrologian, right? Like, I don't think it was bad. Like, I don't see why you have to remove that just because a new class comes. Like, their animations have a different color and stuff, and it still feels different in my opinion, so yeah, that's weird. Yeah, I hope they're not gonna make things more simple. Like, the next patch, what they should do is my suggestion. Add something really challenging for veteran players. Because now you made like some sort of patch for the new players. How about next time we make a patch for the veteran players? Then you have like a balance. You have one half year for the new players and another half of the year for the veterans, for example. I think that's a good plan in my opinion. But let's see what they will do. Like, the game is like popping off. Like, Final Fantasy XIV is more popular than ever, and it's probably still growing a lot. Like, it's actually crazy. That's the first MMO or game I've ever played that actually started as a completely garbage game and then became one of the best games and actually increased in popularity so much. Like, it's crazy. Usually games don't age well. Like, games are popular at the release and they have like a certain growth curve that goes for like a few months, maybe a few years, and then it declines. But FF14 was at the bottom, and then it actually after a longer time went up and still goes up. So it's interesting to see that such games exist, right? And yeah, if you guys are new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content. And I have a question for you Final Fantasy XIV veterans out there. How do you personally feel about the changes? Do you feel like upset about the game's direction? Do you like hate it that stuff has become more simple? Or do you actually enjoy that stuff is more simple? Like, let me know in the comment section. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this one a thumbs up. And I will see you guys next time.